or turned to UBC. Well, this is an extension of Good Morning Uganda, but we are always here from 6:30, the Fantastic Four, with a very big team behind the scenes that ensure we come direct to you wherever you are. We spice up your mornings with relevant information that you need to know about Uganda and globally, any part of the country. We have international news, we have local news, some light moments here and there, because we brighten up your morning no matter how dark your night was. Now we further begin with a guest or guests in studios from 9 to 10, and this morning I want to go a bit international. But of course the issues we are going to be discussing have also an impact on our country. We want to look at the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, so much has been said about this war. Every time you hear more advances being made by the Russian troops, you hear the international community. Recently here in Uganda, we had the non-aligned movement summit that was here. We also had the G77 plus China that ran here in Uganda. And all these, when you look at the Kampala Declaration and all the final documents that came out, they mentioned the issue of Russia-Ukraine to some level. Also, they looked at Israel and Palestine, much as that was the most dominant, but still there was a hint on the other as well. Now, joining me to discuss this, I have Ambassador Henry Mayiga, who is the Consul General of Uganda's Consulate General in Dubai and Northern Emirates, that is the United Arab Emirates. Your Excellency, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shiro, for this opportunity, and greetings to our viewers and listeners.
Well, how is that part of the world?
That part of the world is, and I believe you are talking about the UAE.
Definitely.
It's really doing a lot of business, and for me I'm happy because quite a number of business community people are planning to come and invest in this country in various fields, in the tourism sector, in agricultural sector, in the oil and gas industry, and quite a couple of others where the interest seems to be on the upward trend, and we believe that the sky is the limit as to what we can achieve. And as far as the bilateral relations between Uganda and the UAE are concerned. So I think we are doing very well in terms of friendship between these two countries. That's right, yeah.
And of course, that is one part of the country also where we are having so many Ugandans.
Absolutely, because that's quite an interesting point that you're making, because only last year, 2022, okay, a little bit of 2022 and 2023, we had 120,000 Ugandans living and working in the UAE. Now, currently, as we speak, we have 150,000 Ugandans who are working and living in the UAE, which means that in the last 1 or so years, those numbers have risen by 30,000 Ugandans. So it shows that it's a good destination, in spite of the few hitches that we had about 1.5 years ago, when quite a number of Ugandans were deported because of their misbehavior, I must say. Some were in overstay, as you must have read, as Ugandans must have heard. Others were committed various felonies, and so they had to be deported. But that aside, I think we're doing very well in terms of the numbers of Ugandans who are living and working in the UAE, because Ugandans should be interested in the numbers of remittances that are coming from the UAE, from the diaspora in the UAE, which are in the region of something like 250 and 300 million US dollars in terms of remittances from the diaspora in that country. So that, in my view, is a very good trend, and we can only do better. Yeah.
We're only yearning for more investors from that part of the world.
Absolutely.
Remember recently when we had the trade exhibition during the non-aligned movement at Serena, I saw some of them that committed themselves to come and invest in Uganda, and I can't wait to see that happen.
That's right.
Now, away from that, let's look at the issue at hand today. since 2002, we've been hearing the Russia-Ukraine war for all reasons, looking at the impact. Some have been, we've seen how different countries have decided how to handle this issue. We've seen many taking a neutral ground, saying for us as a country this time around, we are not in the days of Second World War. We are not siding with any country. We've seen some of our brothers, we saw South Africa, that have said, no, for us we are Team Russia. But at the end of the day, we've seen also economic challenges. So we had our fuel issues here. Some countries that depend on wheat from Ukraine are on their knees for that. But one question that I want us to start with, Ambassador. Let's look at the genesis of this, if you're at liberty to share.
Well, it's a long story, but first of all, I think I want to really applaud the Yoweri Museveni administration for the stand it took to be neutral when it came to the voting, or the vote, I mean the vote which was carried out on the floor of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. You remember, if Ugandans recall, we took the line of being neutral. And but of course, we were preparing to have the NAM conference plus the G77 and China, as you have already stated in your opening remarks. And so we couldn't afford to show that we were siding with this or the other. We had to be neutral. And for me, that is a plus for the Yoweri Museveni administration, because it has put us on at a totally different pedestal in terms of respectability internationally. Extremely important for us to note that. And so where are we coming from? Where did these things start? You remember there was a country which was called Soviet Union, or to put it in longer term, in terms of words, the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which encompassed quite a number of countries, of course, including Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, present-day Russia, and quite a number of others. And so when that collapsed, of course, there was that agreement between the West, and nobody wants to speak about it, but there was an agreement between the West and the Russian Federation, which remained as the main, inheritor of whatever was in that place, part of the world, as USSR or Soviet Union. And so there was that level of agreement that NATO should not expand eastwards towards the border of the Russian Federation. But of course, to cut the long story short, the story was different, because NATO began expanding towards the eastern part until the Russians did a red line, and they said that you must cross this one. You must not cross this red line. And that meant making Ukraine and Belarus probably eventually part of the EU and then NATO. And of course, the rest is history. The war broke out between Ukraine and Russia. Russia, in other words, invaded Ukraine in order to forestall what was considered to be a security risk to the Russian Federation. So that is the genesis of the problem. Of course, there were other things that were playing out over time, like when there was that civil war or civil, disturbances in Ukraine, and then the Minsk agreement was signed, which essentially meant that the warring or the conflicting sides within Ukraine would come together and make sure that there was peace in that country. But of course, even the Minsk agreement, and together with the provisions of that agreement, were disrespected. I will not go into the elements of the various groups that disrespected that. And the rest is history. There was a war at our doorstep. And so that is, in summary, what gave birth to the Russia-Ukraine conflict that we have at the moment.
Now, on various international platforms, organizational bodies that bring together different regions, we have seen this as a matter top on agenda. But one would ask themselves, why is it taking this long to be able to bring either meaningful, peaceful, resolutions or solutions, or if not, even militarily, finding a solution to end this?
It has extremely become difficult because of the players, so to speak, that are involved in that conflict. Because on the one hand, as you know, that when war breaks out, one of the biggest casualties or first casualty is actually the truth. But there are people who are probably profiteering from that war, especially the arms industry, because they're making money. They're making money because the sales of the arms have gone up, and so the arms industry will not be definitely pleased with the stoppage of that war. It must continue because they're making a profit. And then secondly, I mean, everybody has been talking peace, including the Pope recently. He was talking about that. The other day we had a delegation from Africa, which was composed of South Africa, Uganda. I remember Dr. Ruhakana Rugunda represented the government of Uganda in that attempt to bring peace. And quite a number of, including even some people, quite a number of them in the Western world are speaking about the need to have peace in that country and the need to stop the war because, I mean, it's affecting almost everybody. You remember how Europe has been suffering because of the stoppage of the gas flows. That, of course, Russia was the biggest supplier of gas to Western Europe. And because of that war, it hasn't been possible, especially through the winters, for the gas to flow to Western Europe. So everybody has been talking about peace. But of course, others have got a different interest. And that interest should be that Russia must be defeated. Yeah, of course, Russia also wants to defeat whoever actually lined up against them. And that's a natural thing, that when you have enemies, irrespective of whether you yourself you are the enemy of the other one, each one of these two sides, or should I say even more of the sides, wouldn't want to be defeated in that kind of situation. So the war is not ending, and yet the suffering is continuing to happen. And so it's really something that is bona fide, that everybody should be looking at the possibility that we should have peace in that part of the world, because it's affecting everybody, not only Africa, but it's affecting Europe, it's affecting the US itself, and quite a number of others are being affected by the continuation of this war. And so the earlier they bring that war to the end, God forbid, because some are making profits, as we said at the beginning of this conversation, but the earlier the war came to the end, the better for everybody. Yeah.
Many would, when you talk about the earlier, the better for everybody. We want to dissect this further, Ambassador, and look at how it is affecting countries. And of course, beginning with Uganda, when you talk about this Russia-Ukraine war, to some people, it may not mean so much. One will tell you, if my own country chose a neutral ground in here, now, where am I concerned? Why should I even be concerned?
This conflict is affecting everybody, as we said before. Of course, maybe to bring Ugandans to speed, it's important for us to appreciate the fact that even before this war, this conflict between Russia and Ukraine broke out, we had the pandemic that really injured economies, including that of Uganda. It injured all the global economies because, I mean, almost the entire world came to a standstill. So as if the pandemic was not enough as a bad happening in the events, global events, then we had, of course, that conflict breaking out between Russia and Ukraine, and henceforth affecting again the economies adversely. And as if that wasn't enough, because you see, we don't have to look at these things in isolation. As if that wasn't enough, then the Israeli-Hamas war also breaks out, affecting the shipping lines through the Red Sea. So I put all these things together. When you put them all together, you see that in a sense, all these things have affected the economies of the world. But of course, for us, we are concerned as a continent and also as a country, as Uganda. Little did I know that actually 30% of the wheat that we consume in this country, in Uganda, actually comes from Ukraine. And so there is that direct, or should I say indirect effect on the economy of Uganda because of that 30% element of the wheat that comes to Uganda. So you can see how we are affected. But on a wider scale, that conflict between Russia and Ukraine has affected everybody, as we said before at the beginning of this conversation, because if we may look at the entire continent of Africa, of which of course Uganda is part, it is simulated that by researchers that the entire African continent is going to lose $7 billion in terms of trade. And so that is already a bad effect. Now, if you did just a simple arithmetic and you divided that $7 billion amongst the 54, or should I say 55, add Southern Sudan, 55 countries, you would probably, just as a simple arithmetic, how much Uganda would lose in terms of trade as a result of all these conflicts put together, including the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So it is projected that Africa is going to lose $7 billion in terms of trade. And how does this come to these things? Already you are seeing how the exchange rate in this country is being affected. And some people are isolating that, probably thinking that it's not connected to what's happening in the rest of the parts of the world, including the conflict that is there between Russia and Ukraine. Extremely important for us to affect, because the exchange rate, for instance, is being affected. The shipping lanes, as we have said, is being affected through the Red Sea. It's affecting also the oil prices. It's affecting the grain, wheat, prices. If you want, you can call them grain, because sometimes wheat is called grain. So you can see that oil is being affected. Oil prices are affected. Recently, you remember we had a problem here, and of course in the rest of Africa, that the oil prices were rising at a very fast rate, and they have, more or less, you remember we had reached even 6,000 per liter.
7,000.
7,000. Thank you very much for that correction, because of these conflicts that we're having, especially the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So prices are going up, the exchange rates are going up, the trade volumes are going down, and so that shows you that the economy is actually being adversely affected as a result of that conflict. And therefore, the earlier we ended this conflict, or those conflicts as we have named them, the better for the world economy, and especially the economies of Africa. Because when you look at the economies of Africa, they are projected to have suffered much more than the rest of the economies elsewhere as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war. And of course, Uganda can't be excluded from that effect as a result of that conflict. So there are countries, for instance, that rely heavily on fertilizers. Again, which fertilizers were being produced by those two countries, Russia and Ukraine. And those things that we are talking about, whether it is oil, whether it is grain, whether it is fertilizers, have been shifted over donkey years through the Black Sea, which Black Sea is actually more or less the epicenter of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And so you can see that the shipping lines, although we've been talking about the Red Sea only, that there are also shipping lines which have been bringing in oil, bringing in grain, bringing in fertilizers and so on, getting affected. Recently, as an example, because of these shortages which have been created as a result of that conflict, Russia gave 25,000 metric tons of wheat free of charge to Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe is one of those countries that have been heavily feeding on the grain from that part of the world. They also gave another 23,000, tons of fertilizers, because the Zimbabweans, because it's basically an agricultural country, in order for them to do robust agriculture, they have to rely heavily on the fertilizers. And the fertilizers are also coming from those two countries. Yes. So you can see how these things have combined to affect the global shipping lanes, the global trading patterns, and so on and so forth. And it's extremely important for us to look forward to a situation where that conflict can come to an end.
Now, some political analysts have come out to say that it seems the world is looking on. And others believe that maybe we've become so complacent to just find how we can live with this that may not end. Is the world looking on?
Well, as we've said before, there have been attempts by many voices, from many voices, including the Pope, who came out recently and was advocating for peace between those two countries. And of course, he must have been concerned by the fact that that conflict was affecting each and every country in the world. in terms of commodity prices, in terms of fertilizers, in terms of shipping lanes, in terms of, really the trade volumes that had been happening. Because absolutely no country has not been affected by those things. Because in spite of the fact that there are those who are so hell-bent to make sure that they continue pouring arms into that conflict. And in so doing, of course, they're just adding petrol to a fire, because the fire must continue as far as they're concerned, because they're making a profit. But at the end of the day, all the economies have been affected. I remember, for instance, recently, it's most especially after the outbreak of that conflict, that there were no, for instance, there was cost of the loaves of bread, not only in Europe, but also in the US. So you can see that they were also being affected as a result of the grains not coming out of that region as a result of that conflict. So extremely important for us to bring that conflict to the end, and whether some are actually mindful about the bad effects, the adverse effects of that conflict or not, I think reason is going to prevail at some point in time. That I know that, for instance, the Republicans who are now holding sway of the Congress in the US have actually blocked funding of more shipments of arms to Ukraine, because they were just pouring arms there, and there was no, the thing was not shifting in their favor, in the favor of Ukraine. I mean, the war was continuing, and of course, that is held up. And Europe is also struggling to make sure that they pour in arms. I saw the French the other day saying that they were going to take their troops into Ukraine to fight Russia. Well, I wish them all the best. But it is more reasonable for everybody to work towards the attainment of peace, so that that conflict can come to an end. This globe is big enough to accommodate all of us, and the continuation of that war is definitely something that is very, very negative, and it should come to a conclusion. But of course, there is also that sentiment, as you've said, that some are saying that nothing much is being done.
Yes, because when you look at the global bodies, let me begin with the simplest for Africa's sake. When we have a challenge within the East African community, we've seen a member state within the East African community, to a certain extent, we have troops now that can go in. You saw the Congo issue, when our troops went in, despite that Tshisekedi saying you're over, go, and then I bring in COMESA, but still there was an effort. The African Union forces, if the countries contribute. Now, when issues go as far as the UN, yes, one would say NATO is not a fair judge here. It's one of the problem causers, maybe because there's that don't move further east, and then don't bring in Ukraine and I think Belarus into NATO. This should not be part of that, but all these seemingly could be the cause of that. But why people think, because even when it's discussed, that was one of the questions posed even to the United Nations Secretary General when he was in Uganda here. But you would still see a non-committal state. When these big boys gather the UN Security Council, a non-committal, it's like, no, it is an issue at hand, but even with ability, no one want to come out very, very clear. Even when we talk about France taking troops, still you will see that even in the early stages, they were also hesitant.
Well, your concern is as good as everybody's, that there should be proactive steps taken,
yes,
in order to end that conflict. And more or less, yes, what has been happening is that people have been giving positions. The Pope has given his position, the position of the Vatican. The UN Secretary General, as you have rightly put it, has given his position on that conflict. The other day, the African Union, as we said, they selected some countries, including my own country, Uganda, the President Yoweri Museveni's administration, to be part of the team that would go to these two countries, Ukraine and Russia. So these positions have been upcoming. But you see, the problem that we have is superpower politics. And once superpower politics is taking part, playing part of these things, and really not seeing the importance of bringing that conflict to conclusion, it becomes extremely difficult for us to speak about how that conflict can be ended, because they are still pulling the strings. And therefore, because they are still pulling the strings, the smaller countries like ours, including the AU,
it's not even, maybe it may not be
difficult.
pulling. These are now, they have now resorted to getting allies. North Korea, for some time, you've been having challenges with these people, come over with Russia. Now, France, I think for some time, boundary issues. Now, I'm on this side. So I'm seeing more forming allies than actually saying, let's address the problem.
Absolutely. Again, we go back to the same argument of superpower politics, because what happened, for instance, when this conflict was being debated on the floor of the United Nations General Assembly, and the vote was carried out. You remember the very initial vote. You don't know how many countries, for instance, came under pressure to vote for position X, because position X was the most dominant. And so quite a number of African countries got carried away. Uganda took the right position as far as I'm concerned, and I think we have to thank President Yoweri Museveni for guiding this government to make sure that that neutral position is taken, so that we are not seen as if we are part of those who are pouring more petrol or is it gasoline or gas onto the fire, so that the fire can continue to burn. So we took a position which was, but so many African countries were under pressure, including even South Africa itself, because they were being told that you must vote this way and so on and so forth. But we took a position and we said, no, we cannot take that kind of position, because ours is about the promotion of peace. And therefore, the earlier this conflict is brought to an end, the better. And so, as to whether everybody has been forthcoming in as far as promoting peace in that part of the world, I think let us put it square on the West, because the West has not been willing, because Russia actually gave out a position at some point in time and said, okay, let's talk peace. It is actually the other side which was coerced by the West in order not to accept to sit on a round table and discuss peace. And so, in other words, for us, our job is cut out, namely to say exactly who is against this peace. And I think it's very clear, because some, even if many countries have taken a position that there must be peace talks, others said, no, we can't talk, because you see, we invaded. But you see, when we go into the history of invasions, I don't know who in the West has not invaded who, because people have been invading other countries left, right, and center, and everybody has seen these things happen over the years. And so, but nobody told them that because you invaded then you shouldn't talk peace, you know. But you see, it is extremely important for everybody to see the importance of having peace in that part of the world, because, as we said before, the lack of peace in that region is affecting all of us. It is affecting all the economies, and that downward spiral of the global economy is not good for anybody. It's not good for anybody, and the earlier people saw the need for peace in that region, the better. So the efforts, yes, have been there, but they've been muted, because they are normally, or in a majority of cases, actually being suggested by smaller countries. The big superpowers are taking in more weapons, they're encouraging the other side to fight on, and none of them is openly committing, putting boots on the ground in Ukraine to fight against Russia. But rather they are giving weapons to one side, and so the conflict is continuing. And I don't know whether that is in the best interests of everybody on the globe. And I really doubt that we are benefiting from that conflict at all as a country. And so, and the effects of that war, in spite of the fact that we've been talking about the economic effects of that conflict, there are also other effects which are more or less political in nature. How we are affected in Africa is not only in terms of economics. We have also been affected in terms of politics, because there is that balkanization, that there are countries, for instance, on the African continent that have decided to side with Russia. There are others, like Uganda, which have decided to take a neutral position. There are also others, scores of others, who have decided to side with the Americans, to side with the Western Europe, to side with the West. And so the conflict can't end that way. unless all the brothers, if we continue in this state of affairs, where some are coercing, especially in the African continent, because that's where you find most of our countries are gullible, and therefore, if Uncle Sam says that you must tow this line, so be it. Everybody just goes towing it, and
he who pays the piper,
he who
the
pays
tune.
the piper
All our budgets, we all look for someone,
Absolutely.
assistance, grants. That is
Absolutely.
how we are designed so
Absolutely.
far. That is our ability.
Absolutely. So that has to come to an end. So Africa, in a sense, has also been balkanized in terms of politics, that these ones are supporting the West. The others are supporting Russia. In the case of Uganda and quite a couple of others, we became neutral. And so that is the balkanization of this country in terms of politics, which also is not terribly good, because we should be moving towards what people in the past used to call a global village, where each one of us is a bona fide member and therefore respected, and therefore our views have to be respected as a result. But that doesn't seem to be obtaining until, I don't know when, people will see reason, and then this conflict, everybody agrees, has to be brought to an end.
Everybody agrees that this has to be brought to an end. At that point, let me also go for a very short break. I'll return. I'm still with Ambassador Henry Maega, and we are looking at the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on Africa, the globe, and more specific, on our country, Uganda.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra. As we close in on the final 90 days of the 2023-2024 financial year, brace yourself for the unveiling of the 2024-2025 draft budget, soaring to 58.3 trillion Ugandan shillings, marking a significant increase of 3 trillion from the previous financial year. With a supplementary budget approval of 15 trillion shillings, the burning questions arise. What justifies this surge? Where does the tax base lie? And what's in store for future supplements? Join us into the journey to depth of fiscal insight with Timothy Nyangweso and our panel of experts on Behind the Headlines. A pioneer panelist of your favorite program, Behind the Headlines, an astute economist. He has taught economics at various universities and now Uganda's permanent secretary and secretary to the Treasury, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Ramadan Gobi. He is a Ugandan development economist and proud alumnus of Makerere University. He is a lecturer of economics and director Business Forum at Makerere University School of Business at the College of Business. Dr. Fred Muhumuza, a journalist, politician and now Member of Parliament representing Gulu West, Badenge Layibi Division. He previously served as the chairman of Gulu District Local Government. Honorable Martin Ojara Mapenduzi, a Ugandan economist, politician and Member of Parliament representing the people of Butambala. He also serves as member of Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. Honorable Muwanga Muhammad Chivumbi. She is an associate professor and Dean School of Women and Gender Studies and the Director Center of Excellence in Notions of Identity at Makerere University. She is also a social scientist with a PhD in International Health Studies, a selfless citizen. Professor Sarah Sally. Don't miss this depth of physical insight on your favorite weekly program, Behind the Headlines. All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Nyati Motion Pictures brings you Tuko Pamoja, a documentary film about our unity as Ugandans and Africans.
Bunyoro would have simply created an East African community that we are looking for today.
The rulers of Bunyoro are actually Luos.
We people who live across the Nile, we are so related from our myth or from just the Nile.
We are the same people and genetically we are even the same people.
We are similar people.
We are one.
Pamoja, we are one.
Use that word, pamoja.
Premiering every week from 3rd February to June 2024 at the National Theatre and Indere Center. Daily screenings are from 4th February to June 2024 at Ham's Cinemax and the National Theatre. To get a ticket, call 0778 787 660. Tuko Pamoja?
TB kills approximately 30 people daily. and 247 Ugandans fall ill of TB disease every day. TB has killed dreams and families. We all deserve a chance in life to hustle, smile. We all deserve a chance to dream and be the best version of ourselves. It is preventable and curable. Know your status. TB testing, treatment, and all TB-related services are free in all government hospitals and accredited private health centers.
As we close in on the final 90 days of the 2023-2024 financial year, brace yourself for the unveiling of the 2024-2025 draft budget, soaring to 58.3 trillion Ugandan shillings, marking a significant increase of 3 trillion from the previous financial year. With a supplementary budget approval of 15 trillion shillings, the burning questions arise. What justifies this surge? Where does the tax base lie? And what's in store for future supplements? Join us into the journey to depth of fiscal insight with Timothy Nyangweso and our panel of experts on Behind the Headlines. A pioneer panelist of your favorite program, Behind the Headlines, an astute economist. He has taught economics at various universities and now Uganda's permanent secretary and secretary to the Treasury, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Ramadhan Gobi. He is a Ugandan development economist and proud alumnus of Makerere University. He is a lecturer of economics and director Business Forum at Makerere University School of Business at the College of Business. Dr. Fred Muhumuza, a journalist, politician and now Member of Parliament representing Gulu West, Badenge Layibi Division. He previously served as the chairman of Gulu District Local Government. Honorable Martin Ojara Mapenduzi, a Ugandan economist, politician and Member of Parliament representing the people of Butambala. He also serves as member of Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. Honorable Muwanga Muhammad Chivumbi. She is an associate professor and Dean School of Women and Gender Studies and the Director Center of Excellence in Notions of Identity at Makerere University. She is also a social scientist with a PhD in International Health Studies, a selfless citizen. Professor Sarah Sally. Don't miss this depth of physical insight on your favorite weekly program, Behind the Headlines.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda. Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back. You're still watching UBC TV and it is the Extra every weekday, Monday to Friday. We are here from 9 to 10, an extension of Good Morning Uganda, which starts at 6:30 with the entire team present just to ensure that we keep you updated of what is happening now. Today we've chosen to go a bit international and look at the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war that has been on for some time, 2022. And one of the things you notice is that it is having global implications. It is bringing economies of some countries. Now we have countries that almost predominantly depend on wheat for their people to eat and feed. Remember what wheat did in Egypt, despite that there could have been other issues. And now here, these are the countries, when we talk about Ukraine, there's so much into that agricultural sector, a lot of wheat comes from there. When we talk about oil and gas, talk about Russia, investments even in a number of countries in the oil and gas sector. Now when we talk about also global politics, where do you lie, where do you fall, where do you pay your allegiance to, and all these are also now challenges. But Ambassador, before we move out in the interest of time, I'm so much interested to dig deeper into our position as Uganda. Yes, you're neutral. Fine. Now, where do we stand to benefit?
Absolutely.
And if all countries chose to be neutral, then what would be the future of this?
Absolutely. But just a quick one on the effects of that conflict to Uganda specifically. Ugandans should be brought to speed to the fact that quite a number of Ugandans have actually secured scholarships in Ukraine. All those things have been affected because now the scholarships cannot flow the way they used to. Yeah, in terms of education, because people are going to do university education, especially in the agricultural sector and so many others. And that too definitely is being affected. So the scholarships are not going to come that easy. Now going back to the neutrality of Uganda, for me it was a very big score. Ugandans should also be brought to speed about the fact that this country had just signed the anti-homosexuality bill into law. President Yoweri Museveni had just signed it and had been blacklisted, especially by the American government. And I think quite a couple of people, including the speaker, had been sanctioned. You remember that they couldn't travel to the US, they couldn't do this or that, and so on and so forth as a result of us. And so the desire, given the fact that, of course, that we remained in Europe, the desire by the West was that Uganda should be isolated because we had committed crimes. One of them was that we had signed into law the anti-homosexuality bill. Then the two were now becoming big-headed because instead of siding with them, we are now becoming neutral. So the anticipation of those who thought that way against Uganda was that we would be isolated internationally. And look at what happened at that time. First, we had the Commonwealth Conference in Kampala here. Then, secondly, we had the NAM Conference. Then, thirdly, we had the G77 plus China. And then, amidst all of those meetings, we also had the IGAD meeting, meaning that those who had actually thought that Uganda would be isolated internationally or globally did not succeed in their thought because Uganda remained part and parcel of the international community. We were not isolated. In my whole life, entire life, and I've said this one before, I had never seen my country holding those international meetings one after the other, almost in just a space of about 2 weeks. All of them, and successfully. Okay, you can hold the meetings and they fail, but successfully we held those meetings. And everybody went away, the documentation was done, the declarations were issued and all these kinds of things which are going to guide 3/4 of the international community for the next 2 years. And then probably the thing will shift somewhere else.
With Her Excellency holding the chairmanship of both.
Absolutely. And is holding the chairmanship. So we are not isolated. If others think that we should have been isolated, I think they made a very big mistake. Because as a result of these meetings, we are not isolated. So the position of us remaining neutral is extremely important because it gives us leeway to take part in quite a number of international engagements without somebody pulling our legs to say you are for this or the other. But of course we know where the truth lies. And therefore that position that we took, and we have, I think, to thank the Yoweri Museveni administration for being thoughtful, for being a government of tact, and they took a position which has benefited us. Yes, of course, we have been affected by the conflicts, the Hamas conflict, the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and of course the pandemic which had been there much earlier, affecting the economy as well. But in my view, I think we have more or less succeeded in circumventing all those problems that were coming in a drove. And the situation would have been much dire. It should have been much worse. But because of the administration that we have in place, and which really considered the position of neutrality was extremely important and something that would add to us in terms of international respectability, it was taken in the interest of our country. And I believe that we are doing very well.
Well said, and of course I must leave room for more programming to continue, but before I move out of here, your parting shot.
The parting shot is that we should continue on this trajectory of making sure that our country remains peaceful. The neutral position that we took is something that we need to appreciate the Yoweri Museveni administration for, because it is definitely benefiting us. Nobody has sat down, for instance, to tell us how many dollar inflow into our country that we achieved during those meetings, and the subsequent, you remember there was also a business forum, that the subsequent actions that are supposed to be taken in order for those investors to put their money here in this country. All these, in my view, are additions, and we should remain as peaceful as we can and of course respect even the position of being neutral in the international stage.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Ambassador
much.
Henry Mayiga, who happens to be the Consul General at Uganda's Consulate General in Dubai and North Arab Emirates. Thank you for always turning up whenever we give you a call for duty.
Thank you very
and
much.
of course, I cannot end without thanking you, our viewer. You have been with us from 6:30, or those that have joined along the way. We don't take you for granted. We always thank you so very much for being there. Those that send in messages on our various social media platforms, we do really appreciate. And I just want to wish you the very best of your day today. And to the farmers, well, hey, please, it is raining, and take advantage of this. Because of climate change, you never know. And for our dear parents and fellow Ugandans, we are having the mass vaccination exercise for yellow fever. Make sure your child gets this vaccination. Make sure you get the vaccination. Reason is that when you're vaccinated, your body develops a mechanism that can fight that particular disease when it attacks you. It doesn't prevent. Vaccination won't prevent. But when you contract, you're not affected as a person who wasn't vaccinated, because you have the antibodies that are ready to attack the foreign that come in your body. It is like an army preparing for war. So when war strikes, well, they're very well prepared. See you tomorrow, God willing, for God and my country. Robert Chirabo, New Internal, wishing you the best.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
As we close in on the final 90 days of the 2023-2024 financial year, brace yourself for the unveiling of the 2024-2025 draft budget, soaring to 58.3 trillion Ugandan shillings, marking a significant increase of 3 trillion from the previous financial year. With a supplementary budget approval of 15 trillion shillings, the burning questions arise. What justifies this surge? Where does the tax base lie? And what's in store for future supplements? Join us into the journey to depth of fiscal insight with Timothy Nyangweso and our panel of experts on Behind the Headlines. A pioneer panelist of your favorite program, Behind the Headlines, an astute economist. He has taught economics at various universities and now Uganda's permanent secretary and secretary to the Treasury, Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Ramadan Gobi. He is a Ugandan development economist and proud alumnus of Makerere University. He is a lecturer of economics and director Business Forum at Makerere University School of Business at the College of Business. Dr. Fred Muhumuza, a journalist, politician and now Member of Parliament representing Gulu West, Badenge Layibi Division. He previously served as the chairman of Gulu District Local Government. Honorable Martin Ojara Mapenduzi, a Ugandan economist, politician and Member of Parliament representing the people of Butambala. He also serves as member of Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. Honorable Muwanga Muhammad Chivumbi,